obviously the paradigm that we're in is not new, right? I mean, obviously the Federal Reserve is relatively new, being created, a little over 100 years ago, but the idea of just printing money goes way back, right? And so this is the paradigm that we've had. And the reason we've had this paradigm is because we've never had perfect scarcity. Without perfect scarcity, we can't shift out of the paradigm that we're in. So we don't have to be beholden to the people who have control over the money supply. I mean, Bitcoin's an absolute game changer. Before Bitcoin, we had to follow everybody else's rules. Well, now everybody has to follow the same rules with Bitcoin.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Matthew Coffin to the podcast. Matthew is a physician's assistant into healthy living and helping others understand the significance of Bitcoin. Welcome to the Bitcoin Age, Matthew.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to have me.
Yeah, I've been following you on X and I really enjoy your posts. But before we get to Bitcoin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Um, first thing I'll mention is, I'm married and I've got 2 kids. That's always, one of the most important things to me. Children are still little. I went through grad school with one little child and actually had our second child in the middle of grad school. And so that was kind of a time in our lives that was a really big struggle because, grad school was rather intense and I wasn't able to have a job while I was in grad school. And so money was very, very tight for us. And, that's really when I kind of started understanding that, hey, there's more to money than just spending it. And I never cared to really study it or think about it because I never really made any significant money. But I knew that after graduating, I was going to have, an actual income, and these things were going to be important and how to save for the future. But aside from family and work, I'm a big golfer. I'm not great at it, but I do enjoy it. So love to travel, and I just love being outside.
Yeah, well, those are all important, right? Family, you mentioned health, that healthy living is important to you, and you're also in the healthcare industry. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that. And do you feel that we have a healthy nation or we could improve?
So yeah, absolutely. So I work in the specialty of neurosurgery specifically, and so we do everything cranial as well as spine. And I would say the bread and butter of what we do is probably spine, right? I mean, I would say 70% of what we see is spine related. And back pain and neck pain are 2 of the most common complaints, chief complaints when patients come to see a provider in many settings, in a primary care setting, in an urgent care, in the ER. So it's a very common complaint. One thing that I definitely notice amongst a large portion of the patients that I see is that they are obese. And that contributes significantly to the development of degenerative spine disease. And so I always tell patients when I want to tactfully bring up that their obesity is a major contributing factor to their spine disease, is I try to say, hey, listen, there's 4 major contributing factors to degenerative spine disease. Number 1 is genetics, 2 is smoking, 3 is occupation, and 4 is obesity. It's a major problem. When I have patients come to me that weigh 350 pounds and they say my back hurts, I kind of in my head have to roll my eyes and say, well, yeah, I wonder why. And so it's a huge issue. And so I try to gauge where their level of education is at. How well do they understand fitness? Do these people even realize that their obesity is a problem? Right? I've had patients over 300 pounds literally tell me that they never thought of themselves as obese. And it just floors me when I hear that because it's clearly there's clearly a disconnect somewhere. And where that disconnect is, I'm not sure. It varies amongst, a wide variety of populations. I think some people just don't want to see it. Other people, they're just around it. Their family's obese, their friends are obese, and that's just their norm. So, it absolutely is a big problem. And when it comes to operating on these people, their health conditions when they're obese like that, and they come in with other comorbid conditions such as hypertension and diabetes, which is a huge thing, those all play major factors in their operative recovery and leads to significant post-operative complications. So we see lots of really, really sick and unhealthy people. And I can tell you that the majority of those people that have most of those complications is because they are obese and metabolically not healthy. So, absolutely, this nation has a huge, huge problem on its hands with the obesity epidemic.
Yeah, well, we could talk a lot about that too, but that's, very useful information. As we all know, the spine is very important. Yeah, I appreciate you just giving us a little background. Tell us a little bit about how you found Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I really found it kind of early, 2020 during kind of the height of the pandemic, right when it was really first starting to take off there, around January, February, and March of 2020, and it was around the time when we had the really big COVID dip, as we would call it, in the market in March of 2020, and that's when I started really paying attention to all these stocks. I finished grad school in 2018, and I was really just trying to focus on paying off some debt in those first couple years. And so I really wasn't saving a ton of money. And when I realized that all these stocks were plummeting, I said, hey, maybe now's a good time to maybe get in on some of this. And so I downloaded the Robinhood app, and while on there, I had noticed they had a specific area for cryptocurrency. And I said, oh, I've heard this before, but I don't know anything about it. So that's when I started looking at these cryptocurrencies. I started looking at Bitcoin, and I started going back and looked at its price history and what this thing had done over time, and starting to see these big, huge bubbles ups, and then these big plummets down. And I remember looking at it and I go, man, this thing was literally pennies 10 years ago, and it went as high as $20,000. Now it's down around $3,000. Maybe I should look into buying some of this stuff. But, I didn't have the guts to pull the trigger at the time. And I was like, I don't know much about this. I need to buy some other stuff. So finally, later that year, later 2020, when Bitcoin was starting to climb back up, and that's when I said, you know what, maybe I need to actually look into this. And so, of course, I started out like many others did into Bitcoin. I started off buying all the scam coins and all these other things, made a little bit of money, lost a little bit of money. But by 2021, I'd actually started spending a more considerable amount of time studying Bitcoin and understanding it. And I just came to the realization, and the biggest realization for me was the perfect scarcity, right? That to me is the end all and be all for Bitcoin. It is perfect scarcity. And we know that scarcity is what truly provides, upward momentum and value when we're talking about any commodity. And so I said, that's it. So I sold everything else that I had, and I went all in on Bitcoin. I stopped putting money into my retirement account at work, and I just went all in on Bitcoin.
That's a bold move. And for many of us Bitcoiners, we get it. But you must have studied quite a lot to get there. Tell us a little bit about where you studied and what you've learned.
Most of my learning initially occurred through YouTube videos, right? Watching a lot of influencers. Some of the influencers, I would even be embarrassed to say that I even listened to them at this point, knowing what I know now. But I think that that's just kind of a rite of passage. I think that a lot of us take. But I mostly started there. I never was a really big reader, and just as you had discussed with AA last week, I listened to your podcast with him, right? And he said, listen, Bitcoin makes you better in every aspect of your life, right? It makes you a better reader. It makes you a better fitness individual, right? It makes you more health conscious. And Bitcoin really did turn me into a reader. So that's when I started just looking, okay, what books are going to be the best for me to read here. And obviously, the common ones come up. The Bitcoin Standard was the first one that I started reading. I've read Ray Dalio's book as well. That's a fantastic book. I've read the other Safety Namus books, Principles of Economics, and then now Lynn's book as well, about halfway through Seb's book. So, and there's been a myriad of other books that I've read as well. And I listen to a lot of Michael Saylor. I really like the Breedlove Saylor series. So those have all been very pivotal in my education with Bitcoin.
Yeah, great references there. Did you know what money is before you started this journey?
All I knew is that it was something that came every 2 weeks when you get paid, and you use it to pay the bills and, maybe try and save a little. And digging real deep to understand what money is, the impact that it actually has on societies as a whole, as well as on individuals in all aspects of our lives. I honestly never thought about those things before I got into Bitcoin.
So, Bitcoin, like you said, makes most of us want to be better people, better in very many different ways. Like you mentioned, health is one, improve our finances is another. Do you think that with Bitcoin, fix the money, fix the world is appropriate?
I think it's 100% appropriate. Anytime I look at the problems surrounding not just our country, but on a global scale, I mean, we're a global world now, right? We're not these individual little countries that we have no idea these other people exist 1,000 miles away like it was, 3,000 years ago. We're all very aware and interconnected on a global trade level. A lot of the issues that we face are honestly simply because the money is broken, right? We could solve so many issues if the money was not broken. Now, there are some issues that we cannot solve simply because we're mortal, and unfortunately, there are innate weaknesses that come with mortality, and you can't overcome those no matter what you do. But we can certainly make our mortality a significantly better experience for all if we fix the money.
Yeah, I agree. What's your definition of money?
My definition of money is energy. I mean, that is exactly how I think of it, because everything, the amount of time that we spend working in order to provide a roof over our heads and clothes on our backs and foods in our mouth, we literally expend our physical energy in exchange for this currency that we then use to exchange for products or commodities or other things that people have used their time and energy to generate for our benefit and for our consumption and use. And so, at a very basic level, my definition of money is energy.
I like that. So, Bitcoin is a decentralized, scarce protocol bounded by energy that relates to the mining. Have you looked into the mining and what are your thoughts on that?
So yeah, I mean, I'm personally not a miner myself. I've never mined Bitcoin, but the principles of it, I certainly can understand it, and I see how it gets such a bad rap because of the amount of energy that it does consume. But it's just interesting when you come to understand it, you realize that even though it consumes a lot of energy to produce or to mine Bitcoin, paradoxically, the more that Bitcoin mining is incorporated in the overall grid, the more stable the grid becomes, right? And the more efficient it becomes as well. When you look at the amount of energy that we produce in this world, I don't know how many people realize it, but we are actually not very efficient at producing energy at all, right? Probably about 60 to 65% of the energy that we actually produce is wasted as byproducts, as heat in the conversion process, right? We take a substance, and through some sort of chemical reaction, we change that into a useful form of energy for us. Well, in that reaction process, there's waste. And there's a significant amount of it. I mean, at best, we're maybe 35% efficient with most of the energy that we produce. And so there's a massive amount of energy out there that is simply being wasted. And Bitcoin mining is a way to tap into that wasted energy that we can then extract more energy. So, yes, it consumes a lot of energy, but it does so in a way that allows us to be more efficient in actually producing energy.
Yeah. I talked to quite a few people about energy. That it's not the sexiest subject, but I continue to learn that yes, mining is going to continue to chase the wasted energy because it needs to be efficient, and also renewable energy. And Texas is one place that has a free market in energy, which I didn't realize. So that's why it's so big there. But yeah, I interviewed Christine Cranley the other day, and she's a energy investor, and she explains it very well. Do you think that Satoshi knew what he was creating?
That's such a good question. I think there's a lot of mystery around, Satoshi. And there's a lot that we don't know about, him or her or they, whoever it is. But I think that whoever they were, they clearly understood something. One, they understood what the problem was. Without understanding the problem, there is no Bitcoin, right? We only create solutions to things when we recognize problems. And I think that they clearly understood what the problem was and they came up with a solution to it. So I certainly think that whoever they are, they had a great idea and a great vision. Do they know to what extent that vision would come to realization and what it would lead to, the innovation? I don't know. Maybe not, but I certainly think that they had at least that basic vision.
Yeah, they they were definitely onto something. I just wonder if they knew how much it would affect the world, and with tied to energy, all of that very incredible gift that was given to the world.
It's really just, it kind of takes you back to any individual who's created any invention of significance, whether that was the printing press or whoever discovered oil. It's just when you go back to the very beginning of harnessing energy, and every time we discover something new, it creates so much more value and it makes our lives better. When fire was first discovered, how much did that improve our lives, right? It gave us heat, it gave us light, it gave us protection. It allowed us to consume foods that maybe before were not edible unless they were cooked. Uh, when we discovered wind power, sailing, it allowed us to cross vast oceans and travel distances that we never could have done to explore more. We used animals for agriculture and increased our ability to produce more food. The Greeks, they used solar energy actually in warfare with mirrors as a way to defeat their enemies. And then obviously we discover coal in the 18th century. We get steam engines, and now we have a better way of transportation and also transporting significantly higher loads than we could with horses. And then we discover oil and gas. We know where that's led to. We now travel around the world in a matter of hours. And next step here is nuclear, which we really need to get more on board with.
Yep, the energy people say that too. Absolutely right. I've heard Jeff Booth mention the telescope and how when that was first developed, I guess by Galileo, nobody could see what he saw. So it makes me think of, well, why do more people not see the benefit of Bitcoin?
I think the answer to that question, honestly, is that we're stuck in a current paradigm, right? Obviously, the paradigm that we're in is not new, right? I mean, obviously, the Federal Reserve is relatively new, being created, a little over 100 years ago. But the idea of just printing money goes way back. right? And so this is the paradigm that we've had. And the reason we've had this paradigm is because we've never had perfect scarcity. Without perfect scarcity, we can't shift out of the paradigm that we're in. So we've got thousands of years of a solidified paradigm that we're used to, that now we've got to find a way to overcome that paradigm shift, because if we don't, there's only going to be a few that truly understand it. And so I think that that really is our job right now as Bitcoiners, is to spread the good news that we've got a different paradigm here. We don't have to be beholden to the people who have control over the money supply. I mean, Bitcoin's an absolute game changer. Before Bitcoin, we had to follow everybody else's rules. Well, now everybody has to follow the same rules with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin doesn't care who you are, how much money you have. All Bitcoin cares about is who's going to put more energy into me, and that's who I'm going to reward. And that's the only way to do it. If China and Russia and Iran, if they want to send a missile to the United States, well, guess what? They have to follow the same rules of physics that the United States do if they want to send a missile over to them. And that's what Bitcoin is, right? Bitcoin is physics. It has a set standard of rules that cannot be changed no matter how hard you try. Nobody can change the laws of gravity. We can input energy into the system to fight against gravity, right? But there are laws for that, and you can't change that. And so Bitcoin is just leveling the playing field, giving everybody the same opportunity.
Yeah, very good point. In the beginning, I introduced you, and you are somebody who is helping others understand the significance of Bitcoin. How do you do that?
Mainly, yeah, I really kind of started with just family and friends, coworkers and colleagues. And, unfortunately, most of those people haven't really cared to listen to me. I think a lot of them think that I'm kind of out there with a tinfoil hat and off my rocker for it. But certainly as time has gone on, I've certainly had more people reach out and say, you know what, maybe you're right. Maybe there is something to this. Are you still doing this? Are you still into it? So started there. And then more recently, I've really been trying to do that through, X's platform, right? We have the ability to reach so many people now through the internet that we never had before. And I was honestly just kind of a silent observer over the last couple of years on X, but recently over the last few months I've tried to become more active within communities and posting and trying to also learn from others. Just going through and finding accounts that are big into finance, but they don't really post anything about Bitcoin. They talk about, certain stocks or real estate. And so I try and find those types of people's posts and go and make comments on them about how Bitcoin is, a great solution to some of these issues. And of course, it's not always met, great, but there are people that, sometimes they're at least open to a healthy discussion. And so now the main focus here is, X, and also I've been trying to get a presentation ready to present at the hospital that I work at. I've had some feedback from some of the group members that I follow pretty closely on X, and I've got the presentation together. I just need to get it scheduled. Work just got kind of crazy the last month with some changes going on, but I definitely would like to get that done sometime this spring. So eventually, yeah, I mean, I would love to start presenting to large groups.
Do you know Noah Kaufman?
I don't know if I do.
So I interviewed him. He is a physician who orange pills other physicians and people in the medical. Check him out.
Oh, Coffin, yes, that he's
Yeah.
he's an ER physician.
Right. ER.
That's right. That's right. Took me a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah. So is your wife on board?
She is, but more so in the fact that she just trusts me with the finances, right? I mean, I obviously talk about it a lot with her, but she herself hasn't really done much studying. She's listened to some of the Sailor Breedlove series, she kind of started reading the Bitcoin Standard, but didn't really get too far into it. So, she certainly does not understand the Bitcoin as much, but I mean, I'm talking about it all the time. So she's not against it, right? Absolutely not against it. And she trusts that I know what I'm doing with it. So I've kind of been given free reign with it.
Yeah, that's great. God Bless Bitcoin is a good documentary to watch.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's, religion's important to me. I'm Christian. And so when that documentary came out, I knew I had to watch it, and I've actually sent it to some family members to watch as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you just never know what's going to get family members and friends. I've given several people the Bitcoin Standard. I think Larry Lepard's book is actually much easier to read for the regular person. So that'll be a new go to. And Seb Bunny's book's obviously great on explaining what money is. So you just don't know, but we keep trying, right?
Absolutely.
Keep moving. How has Bitcoin changed you?
Bitcoin has honestly given me some more purpose. I have something that is driving me. I knew that I don't want to work 40 hours, 50 hours a week until I'm 60, 65, 70 years old. Right? I don't think that any of us should have to do that, at least in a job that we don't like to do. I think that even after you, quote, retire, even at an early age, I mean, most people still find something to do to be productive. So it's not that we don't want to be productive, it's just that we find that most people don't really actually perform a job that they're passionate about. And as much as I love healthcare, the reason I got into it, medicine in general fascinates me. There's nothing more rewarding than when a patient tells you thank you so much for how much you've helped me. But the problem is because the money's broken, healthcare has become broken, and it's becoming a very burdensome task upon the providers in the system because everything you do, you've got to have prior authorizations for $20 medications, and you can't get anything approved, and insurance companies don't want to reimburse. And so it becomes very challenging to actually do my work and my job in that regard. I have to get MRIs and things pre-approved, and sometimes I'm speaking with, an OBGYN doctor about trying to approve an MRI for the spine that has nothing to do with their specialty or their knowledge base. And so it just doesn't make sense. And I don't think that I can deal with that for another 20, 30 years. It's just too challenging. And so, Bitcoin has absolutely given me more hope and more purpose. It's given me significantly more drive and motivation to, one, be a better person. The people in the Bitcoin community, I trust a lot of these people. And the reason that I think we can trust a lot of these people is because that's what Bitcoin is, right? Yes, we say it's trustless, right? But the reason it's trustless is because we don't have to worry about somebody screwing us over, right? We're constantly watching over our backs. We have to have, uh, we have to pay for people to watch over our credit cards to be sure that our identity isn't being stolen because people are always trying to steal from us because the money's broken, right? If the money wasn't broken, the incentive would be to put the work in, expend the energy to get the reward. Instead, people are incentivized to steal and to plunder. And so I think that Bitcoin gives me hope that maybe one day we'll have that world where we don't have to be constantly watching over our backs all the time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And like you mentioned with hospitals and insurance, if we had sound money and if we were on the Bitcoin standard, maybe those amounts would be fair to both sides and we wouldn't, waste so much. I have no clue on how that works, but I can see that because I've heard people say that if I pay you in Bitcoin, I'm going to make sure I'm getting my value for my money, right?
Yes.
And so that I do believe would help healthcare and our whole financial system.
Yeah, there's zero doubt about it. There's so much waste that goes into medicine. There's so many people that are going to doctors to be seen for things that they shouldn't have to be seen for because the overall system is just broken, and so there's no healthy food. If people could just eat healthy and exercise, that would eliminate 50% of the issues that people have to constantly be going to the doctor for and receiving medications. And so just learning to be healthier and live a healthier standard of living in general. And Bitcoin encourages you to do that, right? Because now, if we can save our time and our energy and be able to use that time and energy to do the things that we love, if we're that we normally wouldn't be able to do if we weren't healthy enough to do them, then I mean, yeah, there's no doubt about it that Bitcoin fixes the healthcare issue.
Do you think RFK will help with the healthcare issue?
Yes, I do. I think that he's the first serious person that we've seen in a long time actually address the issues that we have head on. And he's not just talking about, yeah, everybody should exercise and everybody should eat healthy. No, he's putting responsibility on these companies that make food to say, listen, you cannot be putting certain ingredients in these foods because it is killing us. And it's not to say that we have to shut those people down, but we just need to get them to make changes. And I think if we can get these companies and these food producers to actually make the changes, then, that in and of itself will go a long, long way. And that's what he is going to do. I mean, did you hear his speech the other day, yesterday, I think it was, with his confirmation? And he basically said, you know, I've prayed every day for the last 20 years of my life that God would give me the opportunity to change the chronic disease in this country, and especially of the children. And so he's very serious about it, and he's got the backing to do it now. So I absolutely think that nothing but positive will come from this. Is there going to be resistance against it? Absolutely, right? Again, this goes back to paradigm shifts. We've got to change the paradigm in what is healthy and what is not. And the only way we're going to do that is with somebody like RFK Jr.
Yeah. And you remind me that many people come to Bitcoin because of number go up, because they're trying to survive the system, right? They're trying to get ahead. That's why many of us came. But then we stay because there's so much more to it. Where do you think we are in this cycle? And do you focus much on price?
I don't focus a whole lot on price. I obviously used to, but now when I look at the price, I don't feel anything, honestly, whether it goes up or down, because I know what I hold. And anybody who understands Bitcoin also knows what they hold. And so the volatility just doesn't bother me anymore, as I'm sure it doesn't many Bitcoiners. As Michael Saylor always says, volatility is vitality. Where we are in this cycle, I'm not a financial expert. I've really only spent the last 3 years trying to grasp finances in general. I understand the basic principles of, okay, I understand interest rates go up because of this, interest rates come down because of this, liquidity injection and all that stuff. But there's so much happening right now that I think that it's just too hard to predict, where we are in this cycle. And do the cycles even continue? Or, does Bitcoin maintain its volatility over time? Do we just kind of continue this little stepwise fashion up and to the right without any significant, drawdowns or draw ups, right? Does Bitcoin just kind of slowly creep to $1 million over the next 6 years? Or do we continue to get these large spikes? Is Bitcoin going to $500,000 in the next 8 months? Yeah, I don't know, but that's not what matters to me. What matters to me is that I know what Bitcoin is, I know what I hold, and I know where this thing is going in the long term, and that the asymmetric bet on this asset is to the upside. So I'm all in. I will ride this thing to $1 million, or I will ride this thing to $0. Right? This is it's more than money at this point. It's almost feels like a moral obligation.
And a better life, like you mentioned earlier, hope. So, are you teaching your kids about it, or are they still a little young?
They're definitely young, but I certainly try to teach them about it. I've actually got my son. He had a couple $100 saved up, and I talked him into using it to buy Bitcoin. Maybe about I don't know 5 or 6 months ago. And so every now and then he's asking, "How much do I have now, Dad? How much do I have?" I'm like, "Well, you still have the same amount of Bitcoin." So, but it's a good learning opportunity to teach him that you'll always have the same amount of Bitcoin, right? And to understand the difference between fiat currency and what sound money is. And I've also let them watch, little cartoons and stuff like that. I can't remember the name of the cartoon, but somebody has a few YouTube videos out there, and I've had them watch that. And every now and then, my 6-year-old daughter, she'll say, "Dad, do I have any Bitcoin? Can you tell me about Bitcoin?" She'll ask me to talk about it. So yeah, I certainly it's a daily topic in my household. So it certainly comes up.
It sounds like you're teaching them a new paradigm to me. One Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Do you think there's a spiritual side to Bitcoin?
I do, absolutely. There's so many correlations between the principles of Christianity and Bitcoin. And the Bible itself, in many instances, discusses the topic of money. And, I think that God wants us to be productive. He wants us to contribute to society. He doesn't want us to steal from other people what they've rightfully earned. And Bitcoin coincides with each and every one of those principles. It incentivizes us to be productive. It disincentivizes dishonesty and stealing. And so I think that those are big, big factors when it comes to the spiritual side of Bitcoin. And, it's all about being a better human in order to be able to better serve others, right? If I'm allowed to accumulate more wealth, then I can use that wealth to help build others up as well. And that's exactly what Jesus Christ teaches, is to serve others.
Yeah. Where can people find you, Matthew?
So you can find me on X. I don't have any other social media platforms. I'm only on X. Matthew Coffin 13. There were no other numbers available, I guess, and there's too many Matthew Coffins out there, so they made me put a 13 there. So, and I like using my real name. Just kind of helps me remain accountable, I think. So,
Well, 13 is a great number and keep going with your mission. I think it's wonderful. And thank you so much for joining me today.
thank you so much for having me. It's been fantastic.